And welcome everyone to Press TV's news review program, where we get in depth in one of the day's top stories. The International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin over alleged war crimes in Ukraine.
The International Criminal Court has issued 2 warrants of arrest in the Ukraine situation. For Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, and for Maria Lvova-Belova, Commissioner of the Russian President for Children's Rights, for the alleged war crimes of deportation of children from Ukrainian occupied territories into the Russian Federation.
The ICC judge says execution of the arrest warrant depends on international cooperation. The Hague-based court has no powers to arrest suspects. It can only exercise jurisdiction within the countries that are signed up to its agreement. Russia is not a signatory, and the Kremlin has dismissed the ICC claims as outrageous and null and void. The Russian Foreign Ministry also says that the warrant lacks any meaning or legal value. Russia had itself previously accused Ukraine of committing war crimes. Says that Kiev has used Western-made weapons against hospitals and civilian infrastructure in the regions annexed by Moscow in eastern Ukraine. And now joining us for the program is Daniel Kovalik, Professor of International Human Rights from University of Pittsburgh, School of Law from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Hello, gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Tony, to Daniel's point, don't you have to hold accountable the George Bushes, the Tony Blairs, the King Salman and Sons, the Benjamin Netanyahus, the list goes on, as a prerequisite if you want the credibility that you need to go after someone like Vladimir Putin at this point in the game?
Well, look, news like this doesn't stand the first test of any kind of real questioning. So it's just for the stupid people that believe the Western media and that think that they're getting some sort of unbiased proper journalism from the Western media. Look, the United States, particularly George W. Bush, is opposed to the International Criminal Court for reasons which may well be obvious. He specifically opposed it because he is himself a war criminal, along with Tony Blair, starting an illegal war in Iraq. And Blair is still vilified by the British people, I can tell you, for his role in starting that illegal war. We had something like 3 million people out on the streets of London protesting against it, and yet the same Western media still puts Tony Blair on, apparently on the TV, kind of talking about this and that, how we all need to have a digital identity. Actually, there is a complete separation between these 2 different planets, one of which is Western media world and the real world. Look, Russia and China and India are not signed up, and something like a third of the other countries around the world are not signed up to this International Criminal Court, which is based in the heart of one of the main NATO countries. For example, the ICC also did an investigation into the downing of the Malaysian airliner, the MH17, and found Russia guilty on all counts, and the Malaysians were shut out of the investigation. So this is really just a tool of the NATO powers, and I don't think it really has any credibility. Interestingly, the people who are trusted are people like the Malaysians, who have been having court cases going on within Malaysia, which means that people like Henry Kissinger, George Bush, Tony Blair, Zippy Livni, if they set foot in that country, then they will be arrested for war crimes. So really the ICC is just for the stupid people, as I say, people that trust the Western press.
Thank you. And so, Daniel, if this thing really doesn't have any teeth, what is the relevance at this point in time saying that there's going to be a case put on Vladimir Putin? We know that during Donald Trump's tenure there, he shut down the visas and he put travel bans on Fatoua Bensouda, and as prosecutor back then when she wanted to go after the U.S. and the English for war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq, they were shut down pretty quick, which basically shows that the ICC doesn't really work for everyone, does it? You mentioned that it kind of worked for some Bosnians and some Africans, but it doesn't really work for much anyone else. So what's the relevance at this point to bring these charges against the Russian president?
Well, I think this is almost tantamount to a declaration of war, right? Because to have a arrest warrant against a sitting head of state, which Vladimir Putin is, of course, is basically calling on militaries of willing countries to invade Russia and go to the Kremlin and arrest Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's what is being called for here. And that's what is outrageous. And in fact, what, of course, I have recollection of from this is that the same thing was done to Muammar Gaddafi, right? The ICC also put out an arrest warrant for him. NATO bombed Libya from March to October of 2011, and ultimately Gaddafi was sodomized and murdered. So I mean, the optics of this are quite alarming. And I just want to say one other thing. I mean, to the point that you said and my colleagues said as well. The former president of the UN General Assembly, Father Miguel Descoto, he opined that till the ICC applies to everyone, it should not apply to anyone. That is to say, you can't have international law for some people and not for others. And that's how this current situation is. And therefore, it's hard to take the ICC seriously. But again, I think calling for the arrest of Vladimir Putin is an incredibly provocative act.
Thank you, Daniel. Antonio, your final thoughts, how the Russian president may be impacted by this arrest this warrant for his arrest?
Well, I think he'll just shrug it off. It's almost like issuing an arrest warrant for Wyatt Earp. I mean, the guy's dead and he's in another country. It's unhinged, and it does show us just how desperate this propaganda war is. I mean, I don't honestly think Putin is going to be losing any sleep over this. The idea is that he's supposed to be, shivering in his chair, thinking, "Oh no, they're coming for me." Actually, the fact of the matter is that he's an extremely popular leader in Russia. The Russian democratic system is far, far more democratic than the finance capitalism system we have here in the West, where the political parties and the press are all controlled and owned by the banks and these massive investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard, who just literally control. If there's any opposition, they just buy it up and shut it down. So that's not democracy. And so I don't think there'll be any sleep lost over in Russia. They're just watching the West in a way, get unhinged and start to implode. And the propaganda war is not, I mean, the idea, I think, is that we are supposed to think that using the threat of nuclear weapons and lying to the public through a mass propaganda war through television, that the West can somehow win. They've shown already their incompetence through trying to put all these sanctions onto Russia, and the effect has been what? We've now starting to see a potential banking crash go on in the West, not in Russia. So their measures are not working, and neither is their propaganda. I'm just worried that this shows us that here in the West we've got some very unhinged leaders, and one does wonder what extent they'll go to next. What will they do next? We are quite concerned about our own people, because they seem to have been taking on their own domestic population through economic warfare and the cost of living crisis, as well as the Russians. It seems to me they're on a hiding to nothing.
All right, gents, good stuff, and thank you both for joining us on the program here. That was Daniel Kovalik, professor, joining us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. And viewers, that brings us to the end of this segment of your Press TV News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.